They look exactly like the engine you'd buy from a dealer. Perfect paint, official logos, even the serial numbers seem legitimate. But hidden inside thousands of outboards now mounted on boats across America, there's a terrifying secret. Last summer, a family's engine exploded 40 miles offshore. A fishing guide watched his lower unit disintegrate at full throttle. A couple's motor caught fire at the fuel dock. All of them had one thing in common. They thought they'd found an incredible deal online. What these boaters discovered next would expose an underground operation so massive, so sophisticated, that even experienced mechanics couldn't spot the deception. And right now, as you watch this, 50,000 more of these ticking time bombs are already out on the water. In the spring of 2022, something extraordinary began appearing in the classified sections of boating forums. Brand new Mercury and Yamaha outboards, the 40 and 60 horsepower workhorses that power half of America's small boats, were being offered at prices that hadn't been seen since the 1990s. A genuine Yamaha F40 from a dealer costs $7,800 plus installation. These sellers were asking $1,200, sometimes less. The listings were professional. High-resolution photos showed gleaming cowlings and factory-fresh propellers. The sellers had answers for every question. They claimed these were overstock units from Asian factories, the same facilities that manufactured for the big brands. Why pay dealer markup when you could buy direct from the source? In a world where a cup of coffee costs $7 and a truck payment runs $800 a month, it felt like finding a loophole in the system. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The pandemic boat boom had created the largest population of new boat owners in American history. 3 million people who'd never owned a boat suddenly did. But when their old inherited engines finally died, or when they upgraded from that 10-horse to something with real power, they discovered a brutal reality. Genuine engines had 8 to 12-month waiting lists. Marine dealers, already overwhelmed, were charging installation fees that reached $2,000. Interest rates on financing had jumped from 3% to 11% in 18 months. Then came the reviews, hundreds of them, scattered across Amazon, eBay, and Facebook Marketplace. 4.8 stars. Buyers posting videos of their new engines purring to life. A YouTube channel called Budget Boaters Paradise published a comparison that went viral, reaching 2.3 million views. The host held up his receipt, grinning. $6,000 saved. Why, he asked his audience, would anyone ever buy from a dealer again? By the end of that year, a Facebook group called Smart Marine Shopping had 89,000 members, all sharing links, comparing prices, and celebrating their victories over the traditional marine industry. But in January 2024, something happened on Lake Lanier that would change everything. A family of 4, out for their first cruise of the season, heard a sound no boater ever wants to hear. A metallic shriek, followed by silence. Their engine had seized completely. 40 feet of water beneath them, half a mile from shore. When Marine Patrol towed them in and a mechanic pulled apart the powerhead, what he found defied logic. The engine had no oil passages drilled through the cylinder head. It wasn't a manufacturing error. It was impossible. No engineer would design this. No factory would build it. Unless, of course, the engine was never meant to last. Within weeks, similar stories erupted from Florida to Michigan. A charter captain in the Keys watched his lower unit explode like a grenade, sending shrapnel through his hull. A bass fisherman in Texas discovered his engine block was made from recycled aluminum, so soft you could scratch it with a fingernail. Marina mechanics started comparing notes in private forums, sharing photos that would terrify any boat owner. Pistons welded to cylinders after 20 hours, gear cases filled with metal shavings that looked like glitter. Cooling passages deliberately blocked with casting flash. The serial numbers told their own story. They started with letters that looked right, but weren't. YMH instead of Yamaha's authentic 6CIV prefix. Mercury numbers that, when checked against the company database, simply didn't exist. One mechanic in Stuart, Florida, discovered something even more disturbing: the paint on these engines. The beautiful metallic blue and gray that looked so perfect in photos would dissolve completely in salt water within 30 days. Beneath it was raw, untreated aluminum that would corrode through in months. U.S. Customs quietly released an estimate that made the marine industry gasp. 31,000 counterfeit units had entered through the port of Long Beach alone. The math was staggering. At an average of $1,200 each, someone had made $37 million selling engines designed to fail. And these weren't coming from backyard workshops. The quality of the counterfeiting, the packaging, the documentation pointed to something far more sophisticated. The human wreckage spread faster than anyone anticipated. A Wisconsin fishing guide named Tom Hartley lost his entire season when his motor died 200 miles into Lake Superior. The rescue cost him $4,000. His insurance claim was denied with 2 words that would become haunting familiar: unauthorized modification. The bank didn't care that his engine was fake. They wanted their $30,000 boat loan paid in full. Tom's story wasn't unique. By summer 2024, marine insurance companies were reporting something unprecedented. Claims for catastrophic engine failure had increased by 400%, but when investigators arrived, they found engines that technically didn't exist. The legitimate marine industry was being gutted from both sides. Mercury Marine watched helplessly as their reputation, built over 80 years, crumbled with each fake bearing their forged logo. Dealers reported a 40% drop in small engine sales. Who would pay $8,000 for a genuine Yamaha when everyone knew someone who got one for $1,000? Even worse, warranty claims skyrocketed as customers brought in counterfeit engines demanding service. When dealers refused, explaining these weren't real products, customers accused them of scamming to avoid warranty work. The supply chain investigation revealed an operation of breathtaking audacity. A single factory complex in Chongqing, China, was producing 500 units per week. During the day shift, this same facility manufactured genuine parts for Tohatsu under official contract. But when darkness fell, the second shift began. Same molds, same equipment, different materials. Pot metal replaced stainless steel. Bushings substituted for bearings. Every corner that could be cut was cut, but only on the inside where cameras couldn't see. The digital infrastructure supporting this fraud was equally sophisticated. Payment processors, collecting their standard 2.9%, had processed $47 million in transactions. Social media platforms earned hundreds of thousands in advertising revenue from promoted posts featuring stolen dealer photography. Shipping companies moved containers labeled agricultural equipment, avoiding marine tariffs. Everyone took their cut. Everyone looked the other way. And on America's waters, engines were dying, one by one, taking dreams and sometimes lives with them. A former Yamaha engineer, speaking on condition of anonymity, provided the most chilling assessment yet. These weren't just copies, he explained. They were deliberately engineered to fail after a specific number of hours. Real needle bearings had been replaced with brass bushings that would wear through precisely when the buyer felt confident. Stainless steel components became pot metal alloys designed to corrode from the inside out. The counterfeiters had mastered something darker than imitation. They'd perfected the science of planned catastrophe, optimized for exactly one goal: surviving long enough to escape complaint windows on digital marketplaces. The psychology behind the success was painfully simple. Buyers believed they were outsmarting a rigged system. For decades, they'd heard stories about gray market imports, identical products sold cheaper overseas. The automotive world had normalized this mythology. When someone found a $1,000 engine, they didn't see fraud. They saw themselves as savvy consumers who'd cracked the code. The fake reviews, generated by artificial intelligence and posted by bot accounts, provided the social proof. Every success story shared in forums created 2 more buyers. Every buyer who got 20 good hours before failure stayed quiet out of embarrassment. The regulatory response exposed a void nobody had anticipated. The Coast Guard certified manufacturers, not individual products. Without a legal entity to pursue, they had no authority. The EPA could only act against domestic companies. These sellers vanished like smoke. Customs agents insisted the products were properly declared as marine engines, which technically they were. The FBI's jurisdiction ended where international wire transfers began. In the spaces between agencies, between nations, between laws written for a different era, an entire shadow industry thrived. The uncomfortable truth emerged in private conversations. Some buyers knew exactly what they were purchasing. Forums existed, teaching how to upgrade fake engines with genuine parts, creating hybrids that might last a season. Mechanics, struggling in a tough economy, serviced them for cash, no questions asked. Insurance adjusters, overwhelmed by claims, were quietly coached to avoid asking about engine origins. The entire marine ecosystem was adapting to a new reality where authenticity itself had become negotiable. The marine industry's response revealed an uncomfortable mirror. Yamaha rushed to implement blockchain serial number verification, a technology that should have existed years ago. Mercury launched a certified pre-owned program, suddenly willing to compete on price after decades of steady increases. Dealers, forced to justify their existence, pivoted to become installation and authentication specialists, charging $200 just to verify an engine's legitimacy. The counterfeiters had done something regulation never could. They'd forced transparency into an industry that had operated on trust and tradition since the invention of the outboard motor. The unintended consequences rippled outward in fascinating ways. A cottage industry of rebuild specialists emerged, engineers who'd studied the failures and learned to transform these dangerous fakes into functional engines. Young designers at legitimate manufacturers found themselves reverse engineering the counterfeits, not to copy them, but to understand how such cheap production was possible. Community policing exploded in boating forums, with members creating databases of fake serial numbers, suspicious sellers, and warning signs. Boaters were protecting each other in ways the government couldn't or wouldn't. But one question haunted the industry's leadership, whispered in boardrooms from Brunswick to Yamaha City. If counterfeit engines at $1,000 had forced real manufacturers to slash prices by 30%, if dealers were suddenly willing to negotiate, if financing terms had mysteriously improved, what did that say about the previous pricing? Had the marine industry been overcharging for decades, protected by the barrier of consumer ignorance? A veteran dealer in Minnesota, 3 months from retirement, offered the most honest assessment. "This isn't about engines," he said. "It's about trust. When you can't tell real from fake anymore, when the copy looks better than the original in photos, when the internet democratizes deception, the whole relationship between maker and buyer changes. Maybe it needed to." As spring 2025 arrives and boat ramps fill with hopeful families, 50,000 counterfeit engines remain mounted on transoms across America. Each turn of a key is a gamble. Each trip offshore is an act of faith. The fake outboard crisis isn't ending. It's evolving. And perhaps that's the most profound truth of all. Every revolution in industry begins the same way. Someone asks why things cost what they do, and someone else provides an answer, no matter the consequences.